How is AI changing mobile marketing? We're using AI all the time right now, all of us, multiple AIs. Singular just released an integration with Claude where you can literally talk to your data. What's happening with this campaign? What's my best creative? What creative is fading away? What ad partners are working the best? All that stuff. How's it changing our jobs, the very job of growth? Chat, we have the COO of Moburst, Lior Elden. Welcome, Lior.
John, happy to be here.
Super pumped to have you. Super pumped to have this conversation. I mean, yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day who is like, he's a scientist, he's in AI, he's a CEO of a company, he's building AI stuff. And he's saying that, you know, how has your Googling changed or your searching changed? And he said, I probably Google or search 30% of the time that I used to. 70% has gone to whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or wherever it is. I think I'm think 5%. Honestly, I'm going to ChatGPT by default. I'm checking the sources, obviously, because you can't 100% guarantee, right? But I'm there all the time. Is that you too?
100%. Yeah, it's. I think all of us. I think especially marketers have a tendency to be even early adopters, and interestingly enough, we're kind of looking further to go. Like, okay, if people are searching on ChatGPT, then kind of how can we optimize for that? And
Yep.
there's even, I don't know if you've heard of AEO or GEO, kind of
Yes.
optimizing for
Yes.
LLM. So that's something we're going big into now. We can speak about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many pieces to this, right? We're going to dive into all of them. We're going to have a wide ranging conversation here. We're going to talk about analysis. We're going to talk about creative messaging, content creation. We're going to talk about budget optimization. We're going to talk about targeting, probably a lot of other things. And there's a divide here, right? Because there's the AI that you use. There's the AI that you control. Maybe you've built, maybe you've built an agent or something like that. You've started, maybe you've built something more sophisticated. Who knows? And then there's the AI that the platforms are using, right? So there's AI throughout this whole thing. It's kind of crazy. We'll start with analysis, as I talked about. It's a good time. Singular just released this integration with Claude. It uses their model context protocol MCP, and we'll add ChatGPT when they bring out their MCP. They've committed to it. Google's AI has committed to it as well. It's pretty cool. You can just ask questions. How have you been using AI for analysis of your campaigns?
Yeah, so we've been playing a lot with the MCP. It's so great timing that Singular pushed that out as well. From our end, I think it's sort of democratizing access to data. So rather than having the BI needing to pull a dashboard or having analysts needing to pull in for whatever you want, a graph, a data point, we're seeing that for many clients, we kind of produce weekly or monthly reports. So using chats to kind of consolidate, 6 reports worth of data, it just saves a bunch of time. And I think just gives everyone access to all the data without going through the typical gatekeepers.
Exactly. I mean, and obviously there's dashboards in Singular. There's dashboards in whatever tools you're using. There's dashboards for networks and all this stuff, but it's not necessarily the deep data that you want. It's not the slicing and dicing. It's not the pivot tables that maybe you need to understand. And it doesn't always surface key things like which creative is fatiguing right now, right? Or where am I seeing a unicorn creative? It doesn't always surface all that stuff. I do like, honestly, I double check at least 50% of what AI tells me. Maybe I don't even save any time there because I worry, right? There is the problem of hallucination, all that stuff. But it is amazing what Claude is doing. I mean, you'll ask your data something and it'll create a chart and a graph and almost a dashboard for you. Super, super great. Are you worried about hallucination and getting the right information?
Yeah, so I think in terms of hallucination, I think it's getting better by the kind of model. So I think if you compare, O3, it doesn't hallucinate to the levels of some of the previous models. So I think it is getting better. And what we're finding is the more context you give in the prompt, or using kind of custom GPTs or stuff like that, you kind of narrow the hallucination
Mm-hmm.
space and just get better results. I'm with you 100% that fact checking and making sure that don't trust it blind as of yet. but yeah, I think it is getting. It's not as bad as it was a few months ago.
There was a big joke. I think a bunch of cartoons came out because OpenAI had downtime. I think it was last week, Thursday or something like that, right? And it was Eastern time. I'm on the West Coast. I'm in Vancouver, Canada, so I didn't even experience it. But all the jokes were work has ceased. No one's doing anything. Nothing's happening. Have GPT is down. I mean, hopefully we don't get so dependent on that. There's some value in understanding how things work as well. Also, analysis. I love the point that you made about context, because what I find is the way that I will get AI to do things is often I'll use voice and I'll give it like a 30-word query if or prompt, and you can give a lot of context there, and it's a little rambly, right? You don't have to think it out too hard, and it makes a lot of sense out of that, and it gets precisely what you want quite frequently.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's exactly that. And I recently kind of stumbled on kind of a hack of someone, because if you do sometimes when you do kind of live chat, then it thinks sometimes that you're interrupting it, or it doesn't capture the whole messaging. So I've started to give it like to record locally, like a note or something where you can give 10 minutes context of, what you need, what you're
Wow.
thinking about, and then just upload that as a voice memo. And that I think that's lets you unpack a lot of thoughts, context, and kind of get the conversation going.
Wow.
And also
That's longer than your spouse will listen to you.
for sure. And I think sometimes even going back and forth on how to prompt, kind of, what am I not asking, what am I missing? It's actually interesting because as we were kind of touching on the kind of AEO and how people search, so I think the average query on the LLM is like a 25 word,
Hmm.
thinking compared to the Google, 2, 3, 4 keywords at max.
Yeah.
So people are naturally kind of giving much more context and looking much deeper.
It will be utterly fascinating to see how that changes marketing, how that changes discovery, all those things. Because, like you said, the common query on Google or DuckDuckGo, which is what I typically use if I'm actually searching the web now, by 3 words, 5 words, whatever, something like that. It's essentially it's a shotgun approach, right? What's out there, and you get the sort of the biggest thing comes to the top. But if you have a 30-word query or 10 minute, you have 100 words, 200, 300 words. I mean, that's got to be more sniper rifle thing, getting exactly what you're looking for. Will that change how we have sort of fat head, long tail type of distribution of findability? Super fascinating just for organic discovery.
Yeah, we're looking a lot into that, and one of the things the way that we're thinking about it at the moment is kind of trying to aggregate prompts into topics. And we do find, yes, there's a ton of nuance, as you mentioned, between asking something in various ways, but but many times, like how if you think about a brand, how does the LLM think about a brand? How does it think of what it does, what's the kind of tone, voice, the good, the bad. Those are kind of in line no matter what a user searches for. So kind of doing the same, and we're kind of, we have a system that asks the different LLMs the same prompt multiple times with kind of various tweaks. And
Mm-hmm.
so it gives you kind of a good idea, what the LLM or how you're doing across different topics. But you're right that it gets very nuanced, but I think for optimization purposes, it's a good process to understand how does ChatGPT, what does it think about my
Mm-hmm.
brand, my company, my product, and then kind of nail down to the very specific prompt niche feature. How do I compare versus my competitors? How do I rank?
Mm-hmm.
So a very
Mm-hmm.
interesting new space we're diving deep into.
Cool. Okay, we got to hit creative because that's where a lot of people are using it. I mean, like literally for my podcasts, often I'll ask creative diffusion because I think it's better than Dolly, which is with OpenAI and stuff like that, to create something for me. And there we go. And I've got some. I was actually on stage at Web Summit end of May, May 29th, with the CEO of Ideogram and the COO of PixArt. And PixArt, of course, is huge, right? Imagery all over. Ideogram is new and they're coming up, and they've got some tools that take what you do an image creation, generative AI for images, and they help put brand standards to it, right? Because that's the critical thing, right? Because like you can make anything with AI, but can you get repeatable? Can you get your brand in there? Can you get your logo in there? Does it do the text right if you have some text? Can you establish this is my look? This is what my brand looks like. This is what I want my imagery to look like, right? That's kind of a core challenge still, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very interesting because that's definitely one of the challenges that we're seeing, that consistency. Um, and I think also some of the tools have some features around helping with that. That certainly is like we find ourselves like going to the old ways of designing and doing creatives to kind of do that
It's like
adapting
the
for
Stone Age actually going
yeah.
into Photoshop or something.
Yeah, I think one of the places where we kind of feel that there's a nice mix to how does human and AI come together. So we've been experimenting like with so we have a client which wants a video production.
Mm-hmm.
So the obviously the whole ideation and kind of storyboard process. So AI is big there, but then actually like recreating some of the so what we did like we had AI create the whole scene and
Mm-hmm.
how it will look, and then we actually created like in the production scene based on some of the stuff that AI envisioned, allowing us to have the complete control we want and do like 30-second videos, etc. But still kind of save across all the stuff that would otherwise just designing how the set will look and the storyboard and all of that. So I think there's a nice, obviously at some point VO3 and the rest could do A to Z, but I think for the brands that need that level of control on the brand, on the messaging, there's kind of places where I think there's a nice mix to kind of recreating AI in real life.
That's actually super interesting because there's a bunch of things going on here, right? On the one hand, you have the full AI workflow where you have this kind of collapsing compression of ideation and execution because you can think it, dream it, do it instantly. So you can do that repeatedly and you can see what you get, and you can use Sora, you can use a couple other different tools, whatever it might be, Midjourney, something like that. And there you go. You've done it all instantly rather than having multi stages with multi people. But it also makes sense, like you say, to test a few things. What would that look like? What would that look like? It's expensive and time consuming to do that in the real world where you have 10 people in a studio or something like that, 5 people working in a studio and everything. Cheap and quick to do it there. I like that a lot. Okay, we've got to move on because we have so much to talk about because AI is infiltrating everything, right? We're going to talk about messaging and content. We're going to talk about budgets and optimization. We're going to talk about targeting, and we'll probably talk about the platforms as well. We'll get to all that stuff. Let's talk about messaging and content because that's probably the gateway drug, right? If you're getting into AI and you're starting to use it in marketing, content, text, words, that's probably the gateway drug to AI. How has that changed what you do?
Yeah, so I think again, thinking about going back to the analysis part, and how many now I'm entering a new space. I want to see what the competition is doing. How are they speaking? How does their messaging look like? I think just the sheer volume you can now look at is much broader, and
Uh-huh.
also so that's kind of on the scale level, and on the other
Yeah.
hand I think you can go very micro and get to you have all this data on every user, you can speak to them, you can really personalize the message
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
them. So I think in kind of both ways of thinking of, okay, what's kind of how should I think about my brand given my competitive environment, and also how should I speak to a certain subset of users? What's the messaging there, and kind of constantly reiterating that. Mark Zuckerberg mentioned kind of the idea of having an ad which is tailored to a
Mm-hmm.
user, which is kind
Mm-hmm.
of
He stole
crazy.
that from me. I said that years ago.
There you go. So yeah, so so we're doing a lot with AI to kind of again enhance the based on data, obviously, based on what we know of customers, but just both kind of scale of volume and also being very precise for the end user.
It's literally kind of mind blowing actually when you consider it, right? Because like I said, gateway drug entry point, right? And people will start using AI for generative AI for text creation, messaging, test, find a little message. Maybe it's a creative starter point, right? And then you refine from there and everything else. But there's so much more. You mentioned competitor analysis. Look at these maybe app web pages or look at these sets of ads. Tell me what they're targeting. Tell me what they're doing. Tell me what their brand voice is. Tell me what their brand personality is. You can do a lot there. But also what you talked about is targeting, micro targeting to segments and maybe even individuals messages, and live ops enters the conversation, right? Like we want to have real time stuff. Would you even get to the point where you'd embed some small model, a large language model, but not so large, right, in your app and run it locally? Like on iOS, you've got all these AI cores right in there, right? And higher end Androids, you've got that as well. You could do some very sophisticated stuff to have very tailored, direct to individual even messaging. Would you dare do that? You don't have control. It's not
Yeah.
pre-programmed.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think that's where it's going for sure. The and as you mentioned, the ability to run these small models locally, and also just test and iterate, like go from a
Mm-hmm.
broad message for this subgroup, and then kind of do all these tiny variations for these tiny cohorts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's that's definitely where it's heading.
It's funny because we talk a lot about agency stays, agents. And what we mean by that is we mean some sort of executive function in an AI system that does an entire project that might be multi-stage, might have 10 steps, 5 steps, 50 steps, 500 steps. That's probably out of the scope right now, but many steps, all that stuff. We're getting towards, we're not there yet, I don't think, getting towards where an agent for a brand or for an app or for a publisher could live inside the app and not just be able to do things, but also have a bit of personality, be trained, be a specific model, and kind of be the voice of the app, voice of the brand directly to the consumer. That's not that far off. That's pretty cool to think about. It's pretty crazy and it's pretty insane, but it's one to one, which is kind of the marketer's dream, been the marketer's dream forever.
Yeah, and I think if you go one step further with it and you think, okay, now how can I optimize? Like there's gazillion messages going out there. How can I even understand? Like obviously AI will do a lot of that, but
Mm-hmm.
how do I
Mm-hmm.
think about doing that kind of optimization? And I think that's where probably taking a more, I don't know, funneled approach and a coordinated approach of a bit what I mentioned earlier. Let's kind of try and aggregate those into the topics, into cohorts of users,
Mm-hmm.
and better
Mm-hmm.
understand how different types of users react, again, to get that wider view and get some sense of control. But yeah, I think that one-to-one, which is a marketer's dream, being able to personalize the funnel to your end customer,
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're
Mm-hmm.
heading.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Let's hit budgets. And budgets is interesting, right? Because we hit platforms there because platforms naturally optimize the budget that you've given them, right? They'll try and make sure they get a target ROI, ROAS for you. Probably also try not to exceed that. Like, why wildly exceed that, right? Why would we do that, right? Let's just throw in some crap inventory. We did really, really well in the first half. We're hitting the goal. No, don't go too far, right? But you've also got this sense like I have to manage my budget and I have to allocate between 7 different ad partners. Sometimes it's 25 different ad partners. If you're just starting out, maybe it's 2, 1, 3, something like that, right? Talk about AI and budget optimization. What's that look like for you?
Yeah, so I think there's, as you mentioned, when you're looking like on a given platform, obviously most of the big platforms will spend pretty much whatever you give them, but thinking about that where is the next dollar best spent, doing that budget analysis for the given budget, what's the best performance, that kind of flows into incrementality testing. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so how does
Mm-hmm.
that look when I scale on Meta? That obviously usually raises the cost. do I actually get an incremental effect from that? So we're kind of trying to tie in the measurement piece as well as the performance to try and get a consistent read on where's the next dollar spent, to try and be as performance oriented as we can, and not on an ongoing
Mm-hmm.
basis, but also on
Mm-hmm.
a monthly or quarterly basis when we do the kind of a budget planning for our clients, to make sure we're taking into account seasonality, how are the
Mm-hmm.
CPMs currently on the given network or channel, what's working now for a channel. So I think all these factors, which before AI, we kind of had a good feeling and could use data. Now, again, you could just really multiply that and look on so many other parameters and take into account all of that to get kind of
Mm-hmm.
the to get to the perfect budget allocation for
Perfect.
any
Wow.
given moment.
Perfect. That's hard. I don't know if we ever get there, but I noticed, Lior, that you said the M word. And I hadn't included the M word in here. You said measurement, right? And so I have to say something about measurement, right? I mean,
There you go.
singular is an MMP among other things, right? So that's actually really interesting as well, because the measurement world has changed so much, as everybody knows, right? It's no longer just a GID or just an IDFA. And on Android, GID is still really useful, obviously, but it's like your first party data. It's the delivery data from whatever network ad partners you're using, right? It's some scan data that comes in. It might be some other touches, engagement, views, clicks, other information that we might get from a major platform, a self-attributing network, right? And then mixing that all up together and using very smart technology to understand, yeah, we think that was caused by this. And so there's a lot of AI that's coming into that as well. I do want to hit targeting, and I think targeting is probably, I mean, obviously targeting is interesting, right? Because it's largely a function of the platforms you use, but there's also something like, what channels do I choose, right? Because I know I want a younger audience. I'm more at TikTok or Instagram. I want older people because they actually have money and they spend it. So I'm going at Facebook. It's not sexy, but hey, it works. All of those sorts of things come into play. But there's a lot of AI targeting that goes on the platforms as well, correct?
Yeah. So I think in the big self-reporting networks, what we're finding is essentially most of the networks are kind of pushing you to go broad, right? Meta with AEM and TikTok, they're kind of selling, and Google
And I've
obviously.
seen disasters from that too. I mean, they often work, but I've literally seen disasters from that where, 75% of your budget was spent somewhere where nobody's ever even interested. So they're not perfect. I'm sure
Yeah,
they're getting better.
but I think when you think about targeting in those kinds of places, I think the targeting is done by creative at the end of the day. Like if you're running
Mm-hmm.
broad and you have a different creative targeting a younger audience versus different features and messaging for the older audience, that's where I think there's that. And again, it kind of flows back to creative a bit, but I think there's a lot of interesting ways there to again iterate across targeting through creative on the big
Mm-hmm.
platforms.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going to some of the you now want to go into a subset of users, then yes, obviously you can again run AI across your data and try to kind of hone on what users you should go with this and that message.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's the AI done on the platform's end, which I have this creative, like which user do I show it to? So I kind of feel it's a combination of creative targeting um, and measurement, which we all discussed.
And it is actually interesting because yes, sometimes the platforms screw up, but sometimes we screw up. And sometimes we think our target is X, but it's actually Y. And if we actually let the parameters be a little loose, then sometimes we have these happy discoveries that, we thought we were targeting to this audience, that subset, this group, and it turns out they respond. So then you pivot. There you go. And it works and it's perfect and all things. We've talked about analysis. We've talked about creative messaging, content, budgets. Now we talked about targeting. What have we missed? Like, what are we not? Is there anything that we've missed in AI and marketing? I'm struggling to see that we've missed anything. We must have.
Yeah, I think we covered most of it. It's definitely changing. I think by the day, and thinking about also. You touched about the agentic world, but thinking about how marketers can have a team of agents helping them do different tasks for different things and making
Mm-hmm.
their lives easier. I think that's probably a more local issue, but that's definitely like where we're thinking about how to create these types of agents for our different departments. That doesn't necessarily do the job, but just helps the team with some of the mundane, the kind of technical, the kind of nitty
Mm-hmm.
gritty,
Mm-hmm.
to get out of the people what they're good at, the creativity, the decision making based on kind of all the data that so just in terms of the practicality and day to day, I think that's also somewhere that we'll probably see a lot of innovation.
I think that's a really smart comment. And I think that that's having a bigger impact on not just our working lives, but also the composition of growth teams. In fact, any team in a company that we're actually aware of, because what you're able, there's a bunch of things happening at the same time, right? There's whether it's 10xing or 3xing, I'm not entirely sure, but it's some xing your capability and the amount of work that you can accomplish. It's also changing the composition of teams in terms of, do you need as many junior people as you used to, or are you going for all stars who know how to use AI to get the mundane, nitty gritty detail type stuff that you were just talking about done for them, and then they check it and move on, right? And so I see some sort of, we talked about compression of the creative and production process. There's also some kind of compression of teams, because you have everybody becomes a mid-level manager, whether you're an individual contributor or not, and some of your employees are not human, right? Some of your workers don't have a heartbeat. And so that's really, really interesting. Whether it's good or bad, I'm not entirely sure, but it's something that everybody who's employed in the space needs to think about, be aware of. We have our CMO who created an agent called Tone Ranger, and you can run content through it and does it, match our tone. Is it perfect? I don't know. Is it pretty good? Yeah, it's pretty good actually. And a CMO made an agent, right? A CMO made an AI agent, right? Which means that, no, we're not all coding Python or writing programs in Rust or C++ or something like that. But with the low code, no code stuff that's out there right now, and ChatGPT and the AIs that we have and the point and click, drag and drop, you can make a lot of stuff that's really cool.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of internal stuff with kind of AI hackathons, when hackathons were something that was only done by coders and builders, and suddenly you can give it to a team of ASOs or a team of media managers, and they can build amazing stuff for their using their subject matter expertise. Yes, sometimes they need a technical resource for the last mile just to integrate and
Mm-hmm.
do all the but yeah, we're building a lot of internal tools to do a lot of the grunt work, so again the team could focus on what they're good at.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's what I'm most excited for AI for the short term.
Cool. Cool. Lior, maybe let's end here. Talk to the person who's listening, watching, who says, okay, this all sounds really freaking cool, but how? You're talking about building an agent. Where do I start? Maybe I query ChatGPT on a few things, or use Claude for a few things, or Gemini or whatever. But, how do I do this? What's the entry point?
Yeah, so I think obviously the data is out there, but I think the first step is just to make sure you're making use. Like it's you have obviously ChatGPT and Claude and the rest on your mobile, on your desktop. You're looking for ways to embed them in your day to day. You can ask it. We're asking it on how can we do X better? What are we
Mm-hmm.
not thinking about? It's giving us a lot of frameworks and models which we can then embed. And what we started with when you mentioned kind of the MCP and connectors, I think that's we can suddenly ask our CRM about stuff and across multiple clients. And instead of searching on which ASO clients we worked with in the fintech and what did we do for
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
which would probably take hours and hours of somebody fetching all that information, that's something that suddenly you can just write a query and boom, you have it. So I think just doing it, it's I think really accessible, and we still find employees or clients which I don't know are with every technological evolution there's kind of a bit of resistance, but I think just making sure and making those first few steps.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously
Mm-hmm.
building, going into Lovable, I actually built a ninja game with my kids during the weekend. Lovable kind of had this open for all, where you could choose OpenAI or Anthropic or Gemini. So they kind of opened their platform for users to use it as much as they want. And it's pretty incredible. Like, with my
Cool.
8-year and 11-year-old, we built like a really neat ninja race
Wow.
game.
Wow. What
It's really
platform was
easy.
that on? What
It's
platform?
unlovable.
Lovable.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Very cool. Love it. Absolutely love it. And you know what? If you don't know how to do something, you can ask ChatGPT, how do I build an agent?
There
And
you go.
ChatGPT probably knows. And then it can walk you through it, hold your hand step by step, and doesn't judge you for not knowing something, which is always really, really nice about the AI systems. Lior, we've been talking this whole time. I had no idea you're an Oscar winner. I see the Oscar in your background right there. I mean, like, wow, what did you win an Oscar for?
There you go. No, we were an agency, obviously, so we've won a bunch of different awards. So we have here Growth Awards and Mobile Marketing Awards.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
it's one of
Awesome.
those.
Where's my awards? Wow, I've won nothing. Lior, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate the time and thank you for spending it with us.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.